Excellencies, members of the Permanent Representatives Committee of the African Union here present, Excellencies, Ministers of States Parties to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, Honorable Jean-Marie Nibiratinje, Chairperson, Committee on Justice and Human Rights of the Pan-African Parliament, Honorable Vice Chairperson and Commissioners of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, His Excellency Olof Skoog, European Union Special Representative for Human Rights, Mr. Christian Mukosa, Representative of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights in the Republic of Liberia, representing the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Dr. Joseph Withel, Chairperson of the Network of African National Human Rights Institutions, Madam Hannah Foster, Executive Director of the African Center for Democracy and Human Rights, representing the NGO's Steering Committee, distinguished delegates of state parties to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, representatives of organs of the African Union, representatives of national human rights institutions, international organizations, non-governmental organizations, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, all protocols duly observed. Good morning and welcome to Banjul, the smiling coast of Africa. I am Abiola Idowu, the Executive Secretary to the African Commission on Human and People's Rights and Master of Ceremony for this event. And it is my honor and pleasure to welcome you to this opening ceremony of the 81st Ordinary Session of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, which is being held as a fully physical session and also being live streamed in all the working languages of the African Union. After a year since the last physical session that we had, I wish to warmly welcome you all back to Banjul, the Gambia, the seat and home of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. And it is heartening to see many familiar faces and to welcome new participants as we gather once again to engage in crucial discussions on human rights across our continent. Your presence here today in your respective capacities yet again underscores the shared commitment that we all have to uphold the dignity and human rights of the African people, to once more reflect on our collective progress, share our experiences, and address the ongoing challenges that confront us towards shaping a brighter future for all Africans, where human rights are duly promoted, respected, protected, and fulfilled. Kindly now allow me to take you through the order of proceedings for this opening ceremony. We will commence with a statement delivered on behalf of the NGO Steering Committee by the Executive Director of the African Center for Democracy and Human Rights Studies. This will be followed by a statement by the Chairperson of the Network of African National Human Rights Institutions. Following that, we will receive the statement of the European Union Special Representative for Human Rights. This will be followed by the statement of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. We will then have the statement of the Pan-African Parliament. After that, we will have a statement delivered on behalf of states parties to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. We will then have the honor of listening to the statement of the Chairperson of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. We will receive the statement of the Chairperson of the African Union Commission, and finally, His Excellency the Attorney General and Minister of Justice of the Republic of the Gambia will deliver a statement and formally declare the 81st Ordinary Session officially open. And that will bring the opening ceremony to an end. I now call upon the Executive Director of the African Center for Democracy and Human Rights Studies, Madam Hannah Foster, to deliver a statement on behalf of the NGO's Steering Committee.
Honorable Attorney General and Minister of Justice, Mr. Dauda Jallow, Your Excellency, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, represented by Madam Patience, Honorable Chairperson of the African Commission, Commissioner Remy Going Lungu, and Vice Chairperson, and Honorable Commissioners, Excellencies, Ministers of State of the African Charter, and I crave your indulgence to stand on existing protocols. It is a privilege and an honor to deliver a statement on this auspicious occasion before this august body on behalf of all the participants of the Forum of NGOs in the work of the 81st Ordinary Session of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. Meetings of the Governing Council of the African Center, the NGO Forum Steering Committee, all participants of the forum, and indeed on my own behalf, express our appreciation to the chairperson and members of the African Commission for the honor afforded us to accompany the African Commission at yet another session. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the Forum wishes to thank the government and people of the Republic of the Gambia for hosting the 31st Ordinary Session and the appreciation of the participants of the Forum for the continued support accorded to the African Commission and its stakeholders, especially the warm hospitality enjoyed by all since their arrival. In the same vein, I would like to extend our commendation to the states parties to the Charter for convening their inaugural forum here in Banjul. It is worthy to note that the 7th National Human Rights Institute Forum was also held on the margins of this session. We would like to thank the African Commission for affording the space for its stakeholders to consult and dialogue in preparation for effective participation at this 81st Ordinary Session. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the Forum on the Participation of NGOs was held here in Banjul from the 13th to the 15th, and we will be sharing that particular report with the Commission and all our partners. But permit me to just highlight a few issues. The Forum applauded some positive developments from the reports received by its sub-regional focal points. It asserted that Africa remains at a crossroads as it continues to face serious human rights challenges characterized by conflict, insecurity, and violence, highlighting, among others, the rise in cases of violations of women's rights, poverty against indigenous groups, disease, internal political strife, taking up of arms by rebels, extrajudicial killings, and continue to bring hardships to the majority of our citizens of the affected countries. The African Commission is urged to call on relevant states to observe their obligations and ensure that they nurture peace and stability and observe the tenets of democracy. The situation of human rights in the Sudan continues to be a cause for concern. The continued clashes between the two parties remain high on the agenda of the Forum and on many other agendas. Deep concern was raised about the human rights abuses in that country in the face of the ongoing exodus to neighboring countries. The Forum, while applauding the decision of the African Commission to dispatch a mission to Sudan, urged this eminent body to take into consideration the report and recommendations of the Independent International Fact-Finding Mission for Sudan set up by the Human Rights Council, and in accordance with the Addis Ababa roadmap to ensure that there is cross-fertilization of accountability efforts of both the AU and the UN. Unconstitutional changes of government and its attendant challenges of instability also were raised in a number of countries, including Chad, Guinea, Mali, Niger, and Sudan, where serious and massive human rights violations are being perpetrated against civilian population. Serious challenges will call for a constant and increasing strengthening of the protective and promotional mandate of the Commission. The situation of human rights defenders remains precarious, exacerbated by the increasing closure of civic space. Freedom of association and peaceful assembly remains a daunting feat to achieve. Additionally, the Forum is alarmed at the trend of abduction and killings of human rights defenders in Guinea, in Zimbabwe, and in Burkina Faso, where recently 2 lawyers have been abducted and assassinated and enforced their disappearances in Guinea. The situation of women human rights defenders remains hazardous and unstable according to the challenges faced by women human rights defenders. We want to request that the African Commission consider updating the 2015 Situation of Human Rights Defenders report with a wider sample of stakeholders, which would offer the opportunity to effectively portray the current situation while providing recommendations and a roadmap for future interventions. We also want to congratulate states on the entry into force of the resolution on persons with disability. We, however, would like to call on the African Commission to encourage states to speedily domesticate and harmonize this into law so that implementation would be seen by and enjoyed by persons with disability. We applaud the AU theme to 2025, Justice for Africa to Reparations, a demand for justice and reparations for Africans and diaspora. The forum is hopeful it will pave the way to address impunity and promote reparations. The collective quest for reparations against the backdrop of the lingering detrimental effects of the Atlantic slave trade and colonialism. The outcomes of the documents, as I said, will be shared. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I would like to reiterate the willingness of the NGO community to work with the human rights system and its mechanisms in the realization of its mandate. As partners, we restate our commitment to collaborate. The forum is concerned that the hybrid nature of the last ordinary session, which restricted to a large extent the normal interactive participation that enhances the engagement and networking between the African Commission and its stakeholders. The participants, therefore, maintain its call on all partners and friends to support the operations of the Commission and encourage more face-to-face sessions. The forum participants have continued to demonstrate their dedication to the work of the African Commission, especially in these hard and trying times, by their enthusiastic and passionate contributions to the preparations leading to their participation in this session. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the forum continues to witness the unwavering dedication of its participants, facilitators, and partners alike to the cause of human rights. It is therefore imperative that we proceed with determination, courage, and unity throughout this 81st ordinary session, inspiring our journey towards a united and prosperous Africa, the Africa we want. On behalf of the African Center for Democracy and Human Rights Studies, the participants of the NGO Forum, the members of the NGO Forum Steering Committee, and all its partners, we wish the Honorable Chairperson, the Vice Chairperson, and members of the African Commission a fruitful session. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Madam Foster, for your statement and for highlights of the deliberations at the Forum of NGOs. It is now my pleasure to invite the Chairperson of the Network of African National Human Rights Institutions, Dr. Joseph Withel, to deliver his statement.
Nanri, I wish to express my sincere gratitude for the opportunity to address the 81st Ordinary Session of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. It's also an honor to contribute to these deliberations dedicated to safeguarding human rights across the African continent. Excellencies and honorable delegates, the African Commission has made remarkable strides in promoting human rights across the continent. Its efforts in establishing essential frameworks and mechanisms serve as cornerstones for human rights protection on the continent. The convening of the first joint forum of special mechanisms is a testament to the African Commission's commitment to fostering dialogue and cooperation between different stakeholders on the continent. We also congratulate the African Commission on the second edition of the Inter-Mechanism Dialogue between the African Commission and the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights held in Washington, D.C. in July of this year. Through these collaborative initiatives, the African Commission has reaffirmed its commitment to protecting human rights issues on the continent, while demonstrating its capacity to share best practices with relevant stakeholders regionally and globally. As NANRI, we express our solidarity with the African Commission in protecting human rights on the continent and in supporting the institutional collaboration of the African Commission geared towards strengthening the capacity of the African Commission in the promotion and protection of human rights on the continent. Excellencies and honorable delegates, in the context of regional development, it is crucial to underscore the intersection between human rights and economic growth. The African Continental Free Trade Area, AFCFTA, holds significant potential for Africa's economic development. However, it currently lacks a strong human rights dimension. Human rights are not separate from development. They are essential to ensuring inclusive, equitable, and sustainable growth. NANRI advocates for the integration of human rights standards into the AFCFTA framework. We also encourage the African Commission to continue its collaboration with regional bodies and national human rights institutions, NHRIs, to embed human rights considerations into Africa's economic policies and initiatives, thereby aligning with the African Union Agenda 2063 vision of a prosperous, peaceful, and integrated continent. The integration of human rights into broader development agendas, such as the African Union Agenda 2063, remains a central priority for the network of African national human rights institutions. We believe that the African Commission's work significantly contributes to the long-term vision of a prosperous, peaceful, and people-centered Africa. By ensuring that human rights are at the core of all development processes, we lay the foundation for inclusive and sustainable growth that respects the dignity of all Africans. Another critical area for collaboration is the promotion of business and human rights. NANRI has been actively involved in the African Business and Human Rights Forum, which emphasizes the role of human rights in shaping the business environment. Businesses can either be enablers or violators of human rights, making it imperative to establish structures that hold them accountable while promoting their positive contributions to Africa's development. The forum is a positive step in the right direction, and we encourage the African Commission to continue supporting this initiative to ensure that human rights principles underpin Africa's economic activities. Excellencies, honorable delegates, limited access to justice, especially for marginalized communities, continues to undermine the realization of human rights on the continent. The African Commission continues to face constraints such as limited financial resources, political interference, and insufficient engagement from some member states. These challenges, coupled with security concerns in various regions, hinder the effective implementation of the African Commission's mandates. Nevertheless, we must remain resolute in addressing these obstacles through constructive dialogue, advocacy, and regional cooperation, ensuring that human rights become a cornerstone of governance across Africa. NARI also acknowledges the vital role of human rights defenders across the continent. Human rights defenders face increasing threats, including harassment, intimidation, violence, and particularly in regions plagued by corruption and weak governance. NARI stands in solidarity with human rights defenders and urges the African Commission to strengthen protection mechanisms for those on the front lines of human rights advocacy. Corruption undermines human rights, erodes trust in public institutions, and creates an enabling environment for abuse and exploitation. Combating corruption must be a priority, as it poses one of the greatest threats to achieving the human rights agenda in Africa. Finally, as we reflect on the African Commission's achievements and the work that remains, NARI reaffirms its commitment to working alongside the African Commission to ensure the realization of the rights enshrined in the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. We must continue to advocate for the protection of human rights defenders, enhance corporate accountability and economic prosperity, and address the root causes of inequality. Together, we can build a continent where human rights are not just an aspiration, but a lived reality for all. I thank you.
Had been held and the rightfully elected president was blocked from acceding. Together, the African countries on the Council worked with us, the Europeans, to have the Security Council back up the new legitimate president. With hard work and persuasion, we achieved full backing from the other members on the Security Council, and I was able personally to call President Barrow, still in exile, to congratulate him and to give him the full support of the United Nations Security Council at the time. Since then, the Gambia has consolidated democracy, its global support for accountability and human rights. Hosting the African Commission on Human and People's Rights is a testimony to this commitment. Regretfully, the Security Council is no longer united on such issues, on democracy and human rights. So, the need for Europe and for Africa to work together to defend democracy and human rights is all the more important, and that is partly why I wanted to be here today. Both the African Union and the European Union were founded to foster peace and prosperity for our people. Human rights is at the core of that objective. It should be the compass by which we navigate our national policies and global engagements. Effective upholding of human rights starts with inclusion, without exceptions and without discrimination. For that exact reason, the convening of your ordinary session is of utmost importance, as it brings together representatives of governments, civil society, national human rights institutions, and experts. Today, we find ourselves, unfortunately, in a very difficult time when it comes to human rights. Crises are piling up, economic, health, climate, conflict related. And we need a collective effort to mitigate and resolve them. And almost every crisis has underlying roots in the denial of human rights. We share the concern just raised from this podium this morning on the situation in Sudan. We deplore the loss of lives and the violations of international law, including international human rights law and international humanitarian law, wherever it occurs, in all situations and under all circumstances. It makes no difference whether it happens in Sudan, DRC, Ukraine, Israel, Gaza, Lebanon, Myanmar, or in any other conflict-affected corner of the world where the civilians pay the ultimate price. We are steadfast in our support for peace and an international order based on respect for established norms and legal obligations, and we see the African Union as an indispensable partner and ally in defending these universal principles. And that should include stronger efforts towards accountability. Conflicts lead to severe human rights violations, but let us not forget that it's usually the violations of human rights that lead to conflict in the first place. In these difficult times, we need more than ever to stick together and build strong partnerships in order to protect the fundamental and universal rights of our people, nationally, regionally, and globally. We have started preparations for the 20th edition of the EU-AU Human Rights Dialogue, which is due to be held in Brussels next spring. This annual dialogue is a concrete demonstration of the seriousness of our mutual commitment to the common cause of promoting and protecting human rights. Participation of this Commission is deemed of key importance to the success of that dialogue. The work you do in supporting the African Union and its member states and your role within the African Charter of Human and People's Rights is a clear and very concrete manifestation of that commitment. I plead with member states and parties to the African Union to make the full use of this incredibly strong and potential human rights architecture that the Commission represents. I want to be clear. Economic, social, and cultural rights go hand in hand with political and civic rights. We are partners on all of them, and we need to relate to a broadening of this agenda. I just came from an interesting conference on climate change and human rights, and like the right to development, it is a highly relevant topic also here in Africa. We have intensified our work on business and human rights. We share the ambition to ensure that the private sector applies human rights and sustainable practices in their supply chains. Last week, I had the honor to participate in the third African Business and Human Rights Forum, together with Commissioner Lita Musuyimi-Ogana, who is here. I informed the forum that the EU is readying itself to support the development of a new Pan-African regional responsible business conduct and Business and Human Rights Program as of 2025. The new African Regional Program will seek to complement the several projects already supported by the European Union and implemented in many African countries. We will also explore the possibility to support the African Union with the implementation of the AU Business and Human Rights Policy. The acceleration of the African Continental Free Trade Area is bound to have an impact on the human rights of all populations in the continent, and we firmly support that, and we are committed to helping ensure that human rights will not be forgotten, but actually at the center. Another important element of our dialogue is the contact with civil society in a spirit of mutual trust and transparency. This includes accreditation to human rights organs for organizations representing persons in vulnerable positions. Hence, we support the ACHPR in providing a central role to civil society, and also for your openness to cooperate closely with national human rights institutions and other human rights organs working on the continent. We need to step up our support and do more to include and empower them, as they are the bridges between the governments and the people. The European Union's relationship with Africa is one of strategic partnership, with shared interest as well as geographical proximity. We cannot let our guards down. Holding each other's feet to the fire in order to live up to universal commitments and to avoid backsliding is what partners do. We would continue to raise issues of mutual concern, including with regard to growing intolerance, racism, restrictive legislation against minorities, ethnic, religious, or for sexual orientation. We will continue to advocate against the death penalty and against discriminatory laws, including on female genital mutilation. But the main takeaway needs to be a positive and optimistic one. We have made huge advances together to advance the dignity and rights of our people and leaving no one behind. Let's step up on that momentum and through an ever closer collaboration bilaterally and on the world stage as we strive to reach the Sustainable Development Goals, the Agenda 2063, and to fulfill the Pact of the Future. Thank you again for the honor of participating in your opening session today, and on behalf of the European Union, I wish you all the best for your deliberations in this 81st ordinary session of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. Thank you very much.
The unwavering support for the critical role the African Commission on Human and People's Rights is doing. On behalf of our office, it's an honor and a privilege for me to stand here today during this opening ceremony and to address this August Assembly on the fact that the theme Educating in Africa Fit for the 21st Century is developed. This theme resonates deeply with the standards and objectives of our office as we continue to stand in solidarity with this Commission and with Africa's effort to promote education, a fundamental human right. In fact, education empowers, ensures progress, and sustainable development. The right to education is enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Specifically, Article 28 of the Declaration requires states to guarantee everyone the right to free mandatory elementary education. In addition, it requires making technical, professional, and higher education available equally to all based on merit. Reflecting in this year's theme, we are reminded of the transformative power of education. Education is not just a tool for individual development, it's also a crucial driver of broader economic transformation for countries. Education equips individuals with the skills and knowledge necessary to navigate increasingly interconnected world. Moreover, it's a powerful catalyst for sustainable development, social cohesion, and the realization of other human rights. The journey to providing quality education for all is filled with a lot of challenges. Persistent inequalities, poverty, ongoing conflicts, and the displacement of the vulnerable people continues to deprive millions of their right to education. These barriers fuel cycles of marginalization and poverty. It's these challenges that the bodies such as the African Commission on Human and People's Rights were established to address in order to guarantee equality in access, education, and other opportunities and services to all. Our office remains committed to promoting the right to education, even in the most challenging situations. Our work extends from conflict zones to refugee camps, where we work to ensure that everyone, including the most vulnerable individuals, have access to education. So education is a fundamental human right, but also a powerful tool for peace, dignity, and prosperity. Ladies and gentlemen, in light of some ongoing challenges with regard to education, the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights actively engages national human rights institutions and civil society organizations to bolster the capacity of key stakeholders in advancing human right to education. During the the NGO forum, which preceded this session, our office facilitates several capacity building activities, exchanges, and dialogues. To name a few, we organized a panel discussion on human rights education aimed at ensuring a meaningful participation in and a fair distribution of benefits when it comes to the African Continental Free Trade Area, AFCTA. We also organized a capacity building on a workshop on reporting on human rights to the Council for the NGOs present here. Similarly, during the National Human Rights Institutions Forum, we organized a capacity building session on how to enhance reporting of those important institutions. when it comes to the Human Rights Council. These initiatives are part of our ongoing efforts to strengthen the human rights mechanism at the level of the continent and globally. Despite those many challenges related to education, it's crucial to acknowledge the resilience and innovative approaches taken by Africans. Civil society organizations, educators, policymakers are working tirelessly to expand access to education for all and improve learning outcomes even in the most challenging situations. The digital divide remains a significant obstacle to education in many of African countries, limiting the full potential of the continent to ensure inclusive and quality education for all. In this context, Agendas 2030 and 2063 provide essential framework to help accelerate progress towards bridging these gaps. Honorable Chairperson, distinguished delegates, the connection between this year's theme and last year's theme on accelerating the implementation of the AFCTA is clear. Both emphasize on Africa's socio-economic development and competitiveness in the global economy. And to fulfill this, Africa requires and meet the demand of the 21st century economy. Africa requires a skilled workforce, which can be get without good education for all. And this should be problem-solving, advocate for entrepreneurship, adaptability technologies, and other advancements. In this context, migration and conflicts hinder education and to provide education to all. Education also serves to help people in those situations to support the shocks and children to cope with trauma. For migrants and refugees, education serves as a gateway to social inclusion, equipping them with the language skills, cultural understanding, and qualification necessary for integration and employment. As we engage in this discussion in the context of this 81st session of the Commission's work, I wish to highlight the presentation that the United Nations Working Group on Involuntary Disappearance is scheduled to organize on the 23rd of October. The working group will present its findings following its visit to the Judicial and Human Rights Mechanism of the African Union and other sub-regional bodies. The report offers an important insight and recommendations for enhancing accountability and human rights protection across the continent. In addition, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights is organizing key side events in the margins of this session. We are organizing a colloquium between our office and this commission on realizing economical, social, and cultural rights in Africa, with a particular focus on the right to education. We are also launching the platform of independent experts on refugee rights, which we explore with the pressing issues of education in the context of refugees and migrants. These events and many others aim to stimulate dialogue and foster collaboration on some of Africa's most pressing issues and rights challenges. Our office is committed to strengthen cooperation in those areas. In conclusion, Chairperson, Commissioners, Excellencies, Delegates, I wish to record that we stand on a critical juncture where education must be prioritized as a fundamental human right and a tool for development. We are collectively responsible for addressing the root causes of inequality, of poverty. We need and we have to promote inclusive and equitable education for all. We are collectively responsible for addressing the root causes, but also responsible to ensure transformative potential of Africa based on education to build a sustainable future for all Africans. As we embark in this discussion, in the context of this session, I urge us all to reaffirm our commitment to education as a catalyst to sustainable development and peace on the continent. Education has the power to change things, to change lives, to build resilient societies, and unlock the full potential of Africans. Together, we can create a future where every African is empowered to contribute meaningfully to the full development of this continent. And I acknowledge the significant work that lies ahead during the various discussions, the session itself, but also the various panels and other dialogues. So on behalf of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, I extend my best wishes for a successful and productive session, discussions, and I'm confident that the decision and deliberation that will be taken from this session will lay new foundations for the right to education in Africa and to ensure that human rights, peace, prosperity for Africa are all interlinked. Again, I thank you for your attention.
Honorable Demingoy Lumbu, président de la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples, et votre équipe, Monsieur le vice-président de la Cour africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples, Monsieur le représentant du haut-commissaire des droits humains aux Nations Unies, Monsieur le président des réseaux des institutions nationales des droits de l'homme et des peuples, des droits de l'homme, Monsieur le représentant spécial de l'Union européenne pour les droits humains, distingués invités d'honneur, tout protocole observé, Mesdames, Messieurs. C'est un honneur et un privilège pour moi de me tenir devant vous aujourd'hui pour prononcer cette déclaration au nom de son Excellence Chief Fortune Charumbila Zefania, président du Parlement panafricain. Je vous transmets les chaleureuses salutations de son Excellence Chief Charumbila et son équipe et nous adressons nos plus sincères félicitations à la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples pour l'organisation de cette 81e session ordinaire. Au fil des années, la Commission a joué un rôle déterminant dans la promotion des droits de l'homme sur le continent. Au cours de son long parcours, elle a accumulé une richesse inestimable de connaissances, de recherches et de données sur diverses questions relatives aux droits de l'homme. Ces connaissances continuent de servir de ressources essentielles dans nos efforts collectifs pour protéger et promouvoir la dignité et les libertés de tous les Africains. La 81e session ordinaire de la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples est importante pour plusieurs raisons. L'ordre du jour qui nous attend, qui met un accent sur la situation des droits de l'homme en Afrique, la commémoration conjointe de la Journée africaine des droits de l'homme et le colloque sur les droits économiques, sociaux et culturels en Afrique, aborde directement les problèmes urgents auxquels notre continent est confronté. Les autres activités clés de cette session comprennent l'examen des rapports des États partis, les discussions sur les relations et la coopération entre la Commission, les institutions nationales des droits de l'homme, les INDH, et les organisations non gouvernementales, ONG, ainsi que l'examen des demandes de statut d'observateur des ONG. Nous, au Parlement panafricain, saisissons également cette occasion pour féliciter la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme pour ses efforts visant à faciliter des dialogues cruciaux, des tables rondes et l'examen des communications, des rapports et d'autres documents clés. Ces activités soulignent non seulement la profondeur de l'engagement de la Commission, mais soulignent également son engagement continu à relever les défis des droits de l'homme en Afrique. Il convient de rappeler l'excellente collaboration entre le Parlement panafricain et la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples. L'institutionnalisation de notre coopération par le biais d'un protocole d'accord MU a renforcé nos efforts conjoints, démontrant la richesse, démontrant la nécessité de complémentarité et de synergie entre les organes de l'Union africaine, en particulier pour traiter des questions complexes relatives aux droits de l'homme. Ces défis nécessitent des efforts concertés de diverses parties prenantes et le protocole d'accord témoigne de notre vision commune de travailler ensemble pour garantir que les droits de l'homme soient respectés et protégés sur tout le continent. Nous devons cependant reconnaître que malgré les progrès réalisés, l'Afrique continue de faire face à d'importants défis en matière de droits de l'homme. Des problèmes tels que les conflits, les inégalités, la discrimination et l'accès limité aux services de base persistent. Pour relever ces défis, il est impératif que la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples et le Parlement panafricain et les autres partenaires concernés continuent de travailler ensemble en renforçant notre capacité à répondre à ces problèmes et en veillant à ce que les droits de l'homme restent au premier plan de notre agenda. En terminant, je tiens à exprimer une fois de plus la profonde gratitude du Parlement panafricain à la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples pour son dévouement indéfectible à la promotion et à la protection des droits de l'homme en Afrique. Notre travail est essentiel à notre mission collective et nous espérons poursuivre notre collaboration dans les années à venir. Je ne terminerai pas sans remercier encore une fois le gouvernement de Gambie pour son hospitalité hors du commun offerte à moi et à ma délégation. Merci beaucoup pour votre aimable attention. Thanks for your kind attention. Asanteni kwa kunisikiliza vizuri.
Tout protocole observé. C'est un insigne honneur et est un grand privilège pour moi de prendre la parole au nom des délégations des États partis ici présentes devant ce parterre de haute personnalité. À l'occasion de la 81e session ordinaire de la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples. Je voudrais tout d'abord remercier le gouvernement de la République sœur de Gambie, la côte souriante de l'Afrique, pour l'hospitalité généreuse, ainsi que le soutien sans faille et facilité accordée aux États partis pour leur participation aux différentes sessions de la Commission. Je voudrais ensuite saluer les efforts soutenus entrepris par le président et les commissaires de l'honorable Commission pour la promotion et la protection des droits de l'homme dans notre cher continent. En effet, malgré les nombreux défis auxquels fait face la Commission, les honorables commissaires continuent inlassablement à s'acquitter de leur noble mission avec succès. Au nom de mes collègues, je leur présente mes vives félicitations et les encourage à aller de l'avant. Mes remerciements vont également aux soldats inconnus que sont les membres du secrétariat qui abattent un travail de fourmi sans lesquels cette parfaite organisation n'aurait pu se réaliser. Mesdames et messieurs, la tenue de cette session réaffirme notre engagement commun envers les valeurs de la Charte et notre détermination à promouvoir et à protéger les droits humains sur l'ensemble de notre continent. Chaque session est une occasion précieuse pour faire avancer nos discussions, évaluer les progrès accomplis et renouveler notre attachement à un avenir où la dignité, la liberté et la justice prévalent pour chaque Africain. Avant de terminer mon propos liminaire, je souhaite plein succès à nos travaux et je vous remercie.
Attorney General, Procureur général, ministre de la Justice de la République de Gambie, M. Daouda Diallo, Madame Patience Chiraza, qui représente Son Excellence Moussa Faki Mahamat, le président de la Commission de l'Union africaine. On a annoncé le juge Modibo Sako, le vice-président de la Cour africaine des droits de l'homme et du peuple, mais je crois qu'il n'est pas là. S'il me suit de loin, je lui adresse mes salutations. Je voudrais également reconnaître la présence de Jean-Marie Nibirantidje, qui représente le président Fortune Chief Charumbira, le président du Parlement panafricain, tout comme je voudrais remercier Christian Mukosa, qui a présenté un joli discours au nom de M. Volker Türk, le commissaire aux droits de l'homme. Je voudrais également reconnaître la présence de son Excellence M. Olof Skoog, le représentant spécial de l'Union européenne pour les droits de l'homme que j'ai eu, qui m'a fait l'honneur et le privilège de me recevoir dans ses bureaux à Bruxelles lorsque je suis allé le visiter il y a quelque temps. Je voudrais également reconnaître sur la haute table la présence de la vice-présidente de la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples, l'honorable commissaire Ramatoulaye Salanjai, ainsi que la présence de tous mes collègues commissaires, honorables commissaires qui sont ici dans la salle, sans oublier Joseph Whittal, le président du réseau des institutions nationales des droits de l'homme, avec qui j'ai eu quelques activités au forum des INDH, ainsi que Madame Anna Foster, une amie de longue date. C'est toujours pour moi un plaisir renouvelé, un insigne honneur et un grand privilège de m'adresser à cette auguste assemblée au nom de l'ensemble de mes collègues, les commissaires, membres de la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples. Qu'il me soit permis avant tout d'exprimer mes vifs remerciements au président de la République de Gambie, son Excellence M. Adama Barrow, ainsi qu'à l'ensemble de son gouvernement pour les efforts continus dans l'accueil de nos sessions ordinaires et parfois extraordinaires, et pour son soutien indéfectible et incontournable pour une organisation réussie de nos activités ici même à Banjul. Excellence, Monsieur le ministre de la Justice, veuillez accepter la profonde gratitude de tous les commissaires pour toutes les dispositions prises et les moyens déployés par la République de Gambie, non seulement en termes de chaleureuse hospitalité habituelle nous offerte, mais également concernant l'opportunité qui nous est ici accordée de contribuer à faire avancer l'agenda des droits de l'homme sur le continent africain et dans le monde. Je voudrais également souhaiter la bienvenue et adresser mes vifs remerciements à l'ensemble des signataires et participants qui ont accepté, malgré leur agenda chargé, notre invitation. J'aimerais aussi saluer la participation de plus en plus active des membres du comité des représentants permanents de l'Union africaine en association, une dynamique de plus en plus grandissante depuis la tenue de nos retraites conjointes, résultat d'une collaboration de plus en plus accrue entre nos deux organes. Excellences, Monsieur le ministre, distingués invités, Mesdames et Messieurs, cette 81e session ordinaire de la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples, comme les autres sessions publiques avant elle, est l'une des activités les plus importantes de notre institution, constituant par là un moment unique et privilégié de nous retrouver ensemble pour échanger, pour bilanter en matière de droits de l'homme, évaluer les questions émergentes, identifier les domaines de préoccupation, partager les bonnes pratiques qui peuvent être dupliquées dans d'autres continents. Comme nous vous le rappelons régulièrement, la promotion et la protection des droits de l'homme est un chantier en perpétuelle construction. Et chaque session ordinaire de la Commission constitue pour les différentes parties prenantes le baromètre temporel par excellence de l'évaluation de la situation des droits de l'homme sur notre continent. Le Forum des représentants des institutions nationales des droits de l'homme et celui des acteurs de la société civile ont déjà posé des diagnostics en prélude à cette session. Les représentants des États partis se sont également réunis pour la toute première fois dans le cadre du forum en précession des États les 15 et 16 octobre pour dialoguer avec la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples. Je voudrais les remercier. Je reviendrai sur ça à la fin de mon discours. Nous avons quelques domaines de préoccupation, comme à l'accoutumée, que nous mettons bien évidemment en évidence pour que l'Afrique puisse écouter la voix de la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples. Et s'agissant de cette question, la question préoccupée et sécuritaire, le domaine sécuritaire reste très préoccupant, notamment au Mali, au Burkina Faso, au Niger, au Nigeria, dans le nord du Ghana, au Togo, au Bénin, au Soudan, en République centrafricaine, en Éthiopie, en Libye, en République démocratique du Congo, en Somalie et au Cameroun. Ces pays sont particulièrement marqués soit par des attaques terroristes ou des crises et conflits internes et parfois même par des agressions de pays voisins. La situation des droits de l'homme dans les régions d'Oromia et d'Amhara en Éthiopie reste critique, j'allais même dire très critique, malgré les efforts visant à stabiliser le pays et à réduire les tensions ethniques et promouvoir la réconciliation nationale depuis la signature de l'accord de paix en 2022. La Commission déplore les multiples violations des droits de l'homme et les conséquences qui en découlent suite à ces conflits armés, notamment des pertes énormes en vies humaines, on n'en compte plus, des déplacements massifs de populations à l'intérieur comme à l'extérieur des frontières, des pillages et destructions des biens publics et privés. La Commission est réellement préoccupée par la recrudescence de la migration irrégulière sur le continent et le bilan croissant des migrants décédés ou portés disparus au cours de cette année sur la route migratoire de l'Atlantique vers les îles Canaries en Espagne. Elle en appelle aux États partis d'identifier leurs efforts, d'intensifier plutôt leurs efforts pour lutter contre cette tragédie qui ne fait qu'endeuiller notre continent. S'agissant de la question de la jouissance des droits socio-économiques et culturels, notamment le droit à l'éducation considéré à la Commission africaine comme un droit fondamental en ce qu'il détermine l'exercice d'autres droits, la communauté africaine et internationale est interpellée sur la fermeture de plusieurs établissements scolaires dans beaucoup de pays et les cas les plus frappants, c'est au Burkina Faso et au Niger, tout en n'excluant pas d'autres pays où le problème de l'éducation se pose. La Commission s'indigne des atteintes répétées contre certains individus sur la base de leur orientation sexuelle et l'identité de genre réelle ou supposée, notamment l'homophobie. Et dans ce contexte, elle voudrait exprimer son inquiétude par rapport à la situation de la Côte d'Ivoire avec cette campagne actuelle qui existe, Zéro Oubli en Côte d'Ivoire. L'environnement général de la société civile et les restrictions de l'espace civique restent inquiétants sur notre continent. Les défenseurs des droits de l'homme, que nous sommes tous d'ailleurs dans la salle sans exception, et les journalistes sont confrontés à des menaces persistantes dans certains pays. La Commission a relevé la restriction du droit à la liberté, à l'expression, le droit à la liberté d'association et de réunion dans beaucoup de pays. Les autorités ont eu recours à un usage excessif de la force et parfois même la force létale pour des citoyens qui ne font que manifester. C'est dans ce contexte que je voulais mettre en évidence, et je vais le faire, qu'au Kenya, plus de 300 manifestants ont été arrêtés lors de récentes manifestations contre un projet de loi fiscal. Les défenseurs de l'environnement sont assassinés en Afrique du Sud et d'autres emprisonnés, par exemple en République démocratique du Congo, en Tanzanie et en Ouganda. En République démocratique du Congo également, les défenseurs des droits de l'homme qui sont contre la levée du moratoire sur la peine de mort, qui a été prise par les autorités gouvernementales récemment, font l'objet d'une répression accrue de la part des autorités congolaises. En Tunisie, la détention des défenseurs des droits des migrants et les campagnes de diffamation à leur encontre constituent pour la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples un défi majeur. Les restrictions imposées à l'utilisation d'Internet compromettent davantage le droit à la liberté d'expression dans beaucoup de pays d'Afrique. La Commission s'inquiète également des menaces et actes de représailles contre les voix dissidentes, particulièrement celles qui s'expriment sur des sujets devenus tabous, comme la durée prolongée des gouvernements, des transitions ou l'adoption de nouvelles constitutions pour augmenter les mandats présidentiels des dirigeants en place. La Commission saisit cette occasion pour inviter les pays en période de transition politique à respecter les échéances établies pour l'organisation des élections présidentielles. Nous ne passerons pas non plus sous silence l'enrôlement forcé des magistrats dans les opérations de sécurisation du pays, ainsi que l'enlèvement de personnes devenu un phénomène qui monte en puissance au Burkina Faso, dont l'illustration récente est l'enlèvement de 2 avocats le 10 octobre 2024, dont les corps sans vie ont été découverts 2 jours après. La Commission note un faible taux de ratification des instruments régionaux et internationaux des droits de l'homme au cours de la période d'intercession et voudrait humblement inviter les États partis à accélérer ce processus de leur ratification, étape importante qui constitue une marque de volonté politique des États à la reconnaissance des droits y garantis en vue de leur mise en œuvre pour le bien et l'intérêt des populations. À cette occasion, je réitère l'appel de la Commission pour la ratification du protocole à la Charte africaine sur les droits des personnes âgées, qui jusque-là n'attendait qu'une seule ratification pour son entrée en vigueur. Il se pourrait que pour ce paragraphe, le président de la Commission soit un peu en retard. Peut-être que c'est déjà fait depuis ce matin. À tout cela viennent s'ajouter la persistance de la pratique de la torture et des mauvais traitements cruels, inhumains et dégradants dans nos lieux de détention. C'est encore une réalité aujourd'hui. La surpopulation carcérale, elle continue encore d'être un fléau dans beaucoup de pays, même dans les pays où nous venons de faire une mission de promotion récemment. L'affaiblissement de l'autorité des institutions judiciaires, l'insécurité alimentaire, la pauvreté, le chômage, les violences sexuelles, les discriminations basées sur le genre, la dégradation de l'environnement, les changements climatiques, l'exploitation et la distribution inéquitable des ressources naturelles et la corruption. Et à ce sujet, je voudrais indiquer que l'Afrique a le droit de revendiquer la souveraineté permanente sur ses ressources naturelles et qu'elle ne peut pas vivre qu'avec un schéma où les industries extractives arrivent, prennent les richesses et ne laissent rien sur place. Excellences, Monsieur le ministre, distingués invités, Mesdames et Messieurs, malgré ces défis, ce tableau sombre, plusieurs développements positifs existaient tout de même en matière des droits de l'homme et ces développements positifs ont marqué le continent depuis notre dernière rencontre au mois de mai 2024. Il est important d'en souligner quelques-uns car ils témoignent de notre capacité à avancer, ils témoignent de notre résilience malgré ces tableaux simples. Il me plaît de saluer les élections présidentielles pacifiques et réussies tenues en Mauritanie, au Rwanda et en Tunisie. Je voudrais, au nom de tous mes collègues, féliciter les heureux gagnants et remercier les candidats malheureux qui ont fait preuve d'un véritable esprit démocratique en acceptant les résultats des urnes. Je félicite également les citoyens de ces pays pour ce succès qui doit être approfondi et accompagné, tout en saisissant cette occasion pour inviter les États qui se préparent pour les élections dans les prochains mois de prendre les dispositions qui s'imposent pour permettre des élections libres, justes, pacifiques, honnêtes et transparentes dans le strict respect de la Charte africaine de la démocratie, des élections et de la bonne gouvernance. La Commission accueille avec satisfaction la grâce présidentielle du 2 août 2024 accordée par le président de la République du Bénin à 464 détenus afin de désengorger les prisons au Bénin touchées par la surpopulation carcérale. Je voudrais également, dans ce contexte, féliciter le président de la République démocratique du Congo, Félix Antoine Tshisekedi, qui, dans la même perspective, a donné des instructions à son ministre de la Justice pour désengorger la prison de Makala, où mes chiffres peuvent ne pas être corrects, 1685 détenus ont été mis en liberté. La Commission salue les progrès significatifs réalisés par la Tunisie en introduisant en août 2024 une nouvelle législation qui prévoit des protections juridiques renforcées pour les mères célibataires et leurs enfants, marquant ainsi une étape importante dans la réduction de la discrimination fondée sur le sexe dans le droit de la famille. De même, nous nous félicitons de l'engagement du gouvernement de Sierra Leone à assurer un quota de 30% de femmes aux postes électifs, constituant ainsi un pas positif vers l'inclusion politique. S'agissant de la ratification des traités et conventions, la Commission voudrait féliciter les États qui ont permis l'entrée en vigueur du protocole à la Charte africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples relatif aux droits des personnes handicapées en Afrique. Après le dépôt de 15 instruments de ratification, nous voudrons ainsi leur témoigner notre gratitude. Il y a lieu de souligner aussi la ratification par la Côte d'Ivoire et l'Afrique du Sud de la Convention des Nations Unies pour la protection de toutes les personnes contre les disparitions forcées. La Commission se réjouit de l'adoption par le Parlement panafricain d'une résolution soutenant l'adoption du protocole à la Charte africaine portant abolition de la peine de mort. À cet effet, j'invite les États partis à emboîter le pas en soutenant le processus d'adoption du dit projet de protocole initié par la Commission devant les organes délibérants de l'Union africaine depuis 2015 et pour lequel l'honorable commissaire Idrissa Sow est en train d'assurer le leadership et un suivi. Je souhaite le féliciter à ce sujet. La Commission salue les efforts du gouvernement du Kenya d'introduire des lois progressistes sur les réfugiés, permettant à ces derniers de travailler, de créer des entreprises et d'accéder à l'éducation, une approche qui s'aligne sur la politique mondiale de l'intégration des réfugiés dans les communautés d'accueil plutôt qu'à leur maintien dans des camps. Concernant les e-rights, les droits numériques, la Commission se félicite de l'adoption par les autorités gambiennes au mois de septembre 2024 des lois clés visant à améliorer l'accès à l'information et à protéger les droits numériques. Elle se félicite également du rejet par le Parlement gambien. Après des discussions tout à fait démocratiques, le 15 juillet, d'un projet de loi visant à abroger la loi de 2015 interdisant les mutilations génitales féminines. Nous voulons féliciter le gouvernement de Gambie d'avoir écouté la voix de la Commission africaine, ce qui montre déjà qu'ils sont ouverts aux droits de l'homme. La Commission note également des initiatives d'autonomisation des jeunes dans certains pays par une mise en œuvre de politiques alignées par la Charte africaine de la jeunesse en mettant l'accent sur l'éducation et la formation professionnelle. Dans ce domaine des éléments positifs, je souhaite enfin féliciter les 5 pays de l'Union africaine qui ont été élus récemment au Conseil des droits de l'homme. Il s'agit du Bénin avec 181 voix, de la Gambie avec également 181 voix, du Kenya avec le même score de 181 voix, de la République démocratique du Congo avec 172, ainsi que de l'Éthiopie avec 171 voix. Dans ce cadre, je note et je félicite aussi que c'est l'Afrique qui dirige, qui préside le Conseil des droits de l'homme depuis janvier 2024. Et je voudrais féliciter le gouvernement de Sa Majesté le Roi du Maroc qui dirige cette institution pour cette année 2024. Cette année 2024, la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples est en train d'essayer une nouvelle route. Elle a pris une nouvelle route. Le traditionnel et incontournable forum des ONG s'est tenu, comme je le disais au début, avec une très forte mobilisation et un engagement indiscutable des ONG et organisations de la société civile que je souhaite féliciter. Le forum des INDH a été également un franc succès. Nous y avons pris part en tant que commission. La nouveauté cette année, c'est la première édition du Forum des États avec la participation de plus ou moins 25 États sous le leadership de Madame la Présidente du sous-comité du COREP en charge des droits de l'homme, de la démocratie et de la gouvernance. Avec ces 3 piliers, la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples devait se sentir honorée d'avoir mis en place et accompagné une architecture institutionnelle complète dont le modèle n'existe nulle part ailleurs. Il faut désormais travailler à protéger cette architecture des forces de déstabilisation, je le dis parce qu'il y en a. Il faut désormais travailler à protéger cette dernière des forces de déstabilisation toujours tapies dans le noir. L'Afrique, c'est encore une conviction personnelle, mais je sais qu'elle est partagée par beaucoup, n'ira mieux que si nous avons une société civile forte. Les États sont déjà forts par principe. L'Afrique n'ira mieux que si nous avons une société civile forte. J'ai conseillé et conseille partout que ceux qui ont mis leurs mains sur la société civile puissent les ôter. Les ONG ont été transformées pour la plupart en gongo. Nous devons travailler pour que notre forum des ONG, le FONGO en sigle, j'ai inventé cette sigle, ne soit pas transformé demain en une GO-FONGO. L'Afrique a besoin d'une société civile forte, je le répète. Pour terminer, alors que le système africain est menacé par une certaine cachexie, un affaiblissement, mon message à toutes les parties prenantes est que nous devons tenir bon pour combattre ce que les États appellent le fatigue reporting, pour combattre ce qu'ils appellent le fatigue litigation. Et d'ailleurs, à ce propos, l'Afrique n'a pas connu en 40 ans 1000 plaintes. C'est insuffisant. Est-ce qu'on doit même parler de fatigue litigation? Je n'en sais rien. Nous devons encore travailler ensemble pour combattre le fatigue collaboration. Et c'est dans ce cadre que je voudrais indiquer que c'est un plaisir pour la Commission d'annoncer solennellement que la complémentarité entre elle et la Cour africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples, qui était jadis problématique, appartient désormais au passé. Grâce à l'effort concerté de tous les commissaires, les deux bureaux de la Commission et de la Cour se sont déjà mis ensemble pour aplanir les différends. Et très prochainement, lorsque le temps et les moyens le permettront, nous allons aller vers un instrumentum, une espèce d'accord pour que nous couchions sur papier notre identité de vue sur la complémentarité, mais je peux rassurer tout le monde de ne plus avoir peur de cette complémentarité parce que c'est là où nous allons désormais. Je termine mon propos en souhaitant à tous et à toutes une très bonne session et je formule le vœu qu'elle soit constructive et couronnée de succès pour l'avancement des droits de l'homme, de la gouvernance et de l'état de droit en Afrique. Je vous remercie pour votre attention.
African Union, Excellencies, Ministers of State Parties to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, the Honorable Chairperson of the Committee on Justice and Human Rights of the Pan-African Parliament, Honorable Vice Chairperson and Commissioners of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, Excellency Olof Skoog, EU Special Representative for Human Rights, Mr. Christian Mukosa, representative of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights in the Republic of Liberia, representing the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Dr. Joseph Whittle, Chairperson of the Network of African National Human Rights Institutions, Madam Hannah Foster, Executive Director of the African Center for Democracy and Human Rights Studies, representing the NGO Steering Committee, distinguished delegates of state parties to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, representatives of organs of the African Union, representatives of national human rights institutions, representatives of intergovernmental organizations and non-governmental organizations, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you all. It is with great reverence and a profound case of sense of duty that I stand before you at this pivotal 81st Ordinary Session of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights to deliver the statement on behalf of the Chairperson of the African Union Commission, His Excellency Musa Faki Mahamat. And I will read. Today's gathering is not just another moment in the calendar of our union. It is a testament of our unwavering commitment to the core ideals upon which the African Union was founded: justice, equality, and the inviolable dignity of every African. The African Commission on Human and People's Rights stands as a vital guardian of these ideals. Its mandate, entrusted by our predecessors in the African Charter, is to be the voice of the oppressed, the advocate of the voiceless, and the shield against the forces that threaten the freedom and dignity of our people. This commission has been and continues to be a beacon of hope for millions across our continent who seek a life free from fear, persecution, and injustice. As we open this session, we face the reality of a continent in flux, one where progress and challenges walk hand in hand. In the past year, we have seen inspiring advancements in democratic governance, but we are also confronted with grave setbacks in human rights. From conflicts and displacement to shrinking civil spaces and emerging threats to freedom of expression, our resolve has been tested. Yet our belief in the African dream, a continent where peace, prosperity, and human rights are the birthright of every citizen, remains unshaken. This session of the ACHPR is not just a routine meeting. It is a call to action. The work you do here must address the evolving and complex human rights landscape of Africa. We must strengthen our mechanisms for accountability, deepen our collaboration with civil society, and ensure that human rights are the foundation upon which all other aspects of development and governance rest. Let us use this moment not only to review what has been done, but to reimagine what can be achieved. Our collective will, when galvanized, has the power to change the course of history. And together we must continue the relentless pursuit of a continent where the rights of all people, regardless of status, gender, ethnicity, or belief, are protected, respected, and realized. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, as we gather here today, we must acknowledge both the achievements and the challenges that lie ahead in the realm of human and people's rights across Africa. The African Union has made significant strides in consolidating peace, promoting good governance, and advancing social justice. However, we must be candid in recognizing that the landscape of human rights in our continent remains fraught with hurdles. Over the past year, Africa has witnessed encouraging progress in some regions. We have seen peaceful transitions of power, greater efforts towards gender equality, and a rise in youth participation in civic and political life. These are victories for us all, for they reflect the aspirations we share in building a more inclusive and democratic Africa. Countries have taken steps to ratify key international human rights instruments, while others have created or strengthened national human rights institutions. Yet these advances coexist with persistent and emerging threats to the dignity and rights of our people. The specters of conflict, terrorism, and violent extremism continue to tear at the fabric of our societies, displacing millions and inflicting unimaginable suffering. In too many parts of our continent, armed groups operate with impunity and civilians bear the brunt of their atrocities. This directly challenges the principles we have sworn to uphold. Moreover, the COVID-19 pandemic, while receding, has left deep social and economic scars. It has exacerbated inequalities, widened the gap between the rich and the poor, and pushed millions into poverty. It is often the most vulnerable, women, children, refugees, and the disabled, who are left behind and their rights and livelihoods undermined. As we work towards recovery, we must ensure that our responses are rooted in human rights principles with a focus on equity and justice. At the same time, the global economic downturn has placed immense strain on the ability of states to provide basic services, exacerbating tensions, and in some cases leading to repression and violations of fundamental freedoms. We have seen an alarming rise in restrictions of freedom of expression, assembly, and the press. The very voices that advocate for human rights, transparency, and accountability are being silenced in too many places. The digital age, while opening new avenues for economic growth and social connection, has also presented unique challenges for human rights. Online spaces meant to foster dialogue and innovation are increasingly used to spread hate speech, incite violence, and stifle dissent. Cyber surveillance, privacy violations, and the misuse of technology for political gain have become pressing issues that require our immediate attention. In the midst of these challenges, we must not lose sight of one of the most transformative forces of human rights and sustainable development, which is education. The theme of the African Union for 2024, Educate and Skill Africa for the 21st Century, reminds us of the central role that education plays not only in driving economic growth, but also in safeguarding human dignity. Education is the foundation upon which our culture of human rights is built. It empowers individuals with the knowledge to claim their rights, fosters critical thinking, and cultivates a sense of shared responsibility within societies. However, too many of our children are still denied access to quality education. Barriers such as poverty, gender discrimination, conflict, and outdated infrastructure hinder millions from realizing their potential. This is a human rights issue. Without education, we cannot hope to create just, equitable, and prosperous Africa that we envision. It is through education that we can dismantle the systems of oppression, inequality, and injustice that hold our continent back. The African Union's commitment to education must be reflected in our human rights agenda. We must work to ensure that every African child has access to inclusive, equitable, and quality education, one that prepares them not only for the workforce, but also to be informed and engaged citizens. Our education systems must promote a culture of tolerance, respect for diversity, and awareness of human rights. It is through education that we will cultivate the next generation of African leaders, leaders who are committed to upholding the principles of freedom, justice, and equality. The African Commission on Human and People's Rights has a critical role to play in this regard. By integrating education as a pillar for its human rights mandates, the Commission can help bridge the gap between human rights advocacy and practical transformative change on the ground. We must empower our youth with the tools that they need to build a future where human rights are not just aspirations, but realities for all Africans. However, the success of this commission cannot rest on its shoulders alone. It demands the collective will of all African Union member states, civil society, regional bodies, and the private sector. Only through genuine partnerships can we hope to confront the challenges head-on. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, the protection of human rights is not the sole responsibility of governments and institutions. It is a shared endeavor. Civil society organizations, activists, and the media must be empowered to play their vital role in holding governments to account, advocating for justice, and supporting vulnerable communities. They must operate in an environment free from fear of reprisals or restrictions. The African Union recognizes the importance of these actors, and we are committed to deepening our engagement with them. We must create more spaces for dialogue and collaboration, ensuring that diverse voices, especially those of marginalized groups, are heard and reflected in our policies. We must also enhance our cooperation with international partners and human rights mechanisms, aligning our efforts with global standards while keeping the unique context of Africa in mind. To truly advance the human rights agenda in Africa, we must be bold in our vision and relentless in our pursuit of justice. We must strengthen national human rights institutions, support the judiciary, and ensure that the rule of law is upheld at every level. We must also create a culture of accountability where those who violate human rights are brought to justice and impunity is no longer tolerated. In this regard, I call upon all African Union member states to recommit to the full implementation of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. Let us not forget that this document represents our shared values and aspirations for a peaceful, prosperous, and rights-respecting continent. Its principles must not only be words on paper, but actions reflected in the lives of our people. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, as we embark on this session, I am confident that the discussions, resolutions, and actions that will emerge from this forum will bring us one step closer to the Africa we all strive for, a continent united in its commitment to human dignity and justice. Before I conclude, I would like to express my deep appreciation to the African Commission on Human and People's Rights for its tireless efforts in safeguarding the rights of our citizens. Your work is invaluable, and your dedication is a testament to the values we hold dear as a continent. I also extend my gratitude to all our partners, both within Africa and internationally, who continue to support our collective mission for a just and equitable society. Finally, let us live here today with a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead may be long and fraught with challenges, but together we are stronger. Together we can overcome the obstacles that stand in our way. Together we can build a future where human rights are not just words, but lived realities for every African, regardless of their background, gender, or circumstances. Let us continue with this important work with courage, unity, and hope. The future of Africa depends on it. I thank you for your kind attention.
Tries to encourage the human rights defenders not to be convinced that their work is trivial. What you do is important. And those who are oppressed, like he said, your work means a great deal to them. Honorable Chairperson of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, honorable members of the Commission, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I'm a bit mindful of the few minutes that I was given to deliver a short statement, and as a result, permit me to stand on the existing protocols that have been recognized by the previous speakers. It is an honor to address this distinguished gathering at the opening of the 81st Ordinary Session of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. The recent 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights highlights the global commitments to human dignity and fundamental rights, which had significantly shaped international and regional human rights laws, including the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. Despite these frameworks, the world continues to witness a decline in human rights observance. Conflicts across Middle East, Ukraine, Myanmar, and Africa have led to mass displacement and sufferings, challenging us to reaffirm the importance of human rights. For Africa, human rights are essential to socio-economic development, cultural identity, and the foundation for sustainable progress. Agenda 2063 embodies this vision, aspiring to a continent built on good governance, democracy, and rule of law. Our journey towards this vision requires addressing key challenges. In the recent past, we emphasized the African Continent Free Trade Agreement as an opportunity for economic growth and integration. However, structural reforms, improved governance, infrastructure development are crucial to harness this potential, along with embracing digitalization and reducing energy costs. Respect for human rights is vital for democratic stability and development. Corruption, mismanagement, and political instability strive where human rights are ignored. And inequalities often stem from abuses such as gender discrimination and lack of access to basic services. Promoting inclusive development and protecting civil liberties can reduce social tension and foster stability across the continent. It is not all gloomy, as we also acknowledge the progress made in the promotion and protection of human rights across the continent. There has been substantial progress or increase in the number of active independent national human rights commissions. Additionally, initiatives like the establishment of the Pan-African Parliament and the African Court on Human and People's Rights are good indicators of progress. As the home of African human rights, the Gambia has been leading efforts in transitional justice with the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission, which documented past human rights abuses and recommended accountability measures. The government of the Gambia, in collaboration with ECOWAS, is working towards establishing a special tribunal to address crimes against humanity, following the model of the Extraordinary African Chamber in Senegal. As we strive to build an Africa free from human rights violations, we must recognize that human rights are not just a moral and legal obligation, but a necessity for socio-economic growth and cultural revival. By fostering inclusive, just, equitable societies, Africa can achieve lasting development and reclaim its cultural identity, standing strong on a global stage. With this vision in mind, I have the honor to declare the first ordinary session of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights open. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Your Excellency. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of the opening ceremony of the 81st Ordinary Session of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. Now I would like to make some announcements. Members of the High Table will leave the hall to take a family